The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey, coming to you cordless, everybody. Good evening. What is it? It's Thursday night. That's what it is. April 17th, 2025. I'm Jim Peters. Welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night, episode number 221 for your scorecards at home. We got a really interesting show tonight. Jonathan Lockwood's coming on. He's a military historian and author, and also kind of a space historian, too. It's really kind of fascinating. We taped this afternoon. It was really interesting conversation. Guy knows a lot. I'm glad I ran into him. We are taking calls today, but not for the interview because the interview was pre-taped. We're going to the second half. But we got kind of an interesting thing going on here. Our regular caller, Think, texted me this afternoon and says, I just saw I went to this really weird place called the Willard Insane Asylum in upstate New York, and the staff there says the place is just completely freaking haunted. And I said, well, why don't you call in and we'll do that. So we're going to talk to him later on the phone. You can call in too. You can't call in during the interview, but you can call in while we're talking to Think. If you have questions, numbers on the bottom of the screen here, 325-225-5546. That's 325-CALL-JIM. And you can call that number any time of the day or night. And you have 2 minutes to tell me what you're doing. And, you can make it dirty if you want, but that doesn't mean I'll play it on the air. I would love to do that stuff except YouTube. We're already in the tank with YouTube already. They're already shadow banning us. I don't understand what's going on. Apparently I put too many climate change deniers on or something like that. And Facebook has banned us altogether. I'm trying to rectify that. We're not on Facebook right now. We used to be. But yeah. So yeah, you can call and talk dirty to me, but I don't know if I'll put it on the air. Sorry. The strange thing is Americans too, we have this thing that all pornography is visual, and that's BS. I used to say this years ago. There's this famous trial, and I can't remember who the rapper was, about the fact that somebody said a song he did was legally obscene. And I'm thinking, well, of course it is. Yeah, by legal standards, yeah. But the thing is, there's no pictures. Oh, Jesus. Christ. Like you need a picture to be to have pornography. No, I don't. There's audio porn, and people listen to it too. I know that. I know they do. I got one thing to report here before we go on to our interview. Supposedly, the Daily Mail is reporting that the entirety of the island of Puerto Rico has lost electrical power, apparently because of a solar storm on the sun. Well, that's where solar storms come from, the sun. That's what that means. A geomagnetic storm. Now, I didn't know this. There's a rating systems for geomagnetic storms in the sun between 1 and 5. Just like the things for hurricanes, the ratings for hurricanes are 1 to 5. And apparently this one is a 4, which has been pretty damn dangerous. The last major geomagnetic storm on the sun that hit the earth was, like, from what I understand, I did not read this in the article. I'm pulling this out of my butt. Was about 100 years ago. But of course, there were no electronics then. Now the problem is these storms have a tendency and a capacity to completely annihilate and disable power systems and any device you have that runs a computer chip or anything like that. So I don't know what's going to happen here. Now, the really interesting thing we took last night off, and that's because I'm here in the office. I'm assembling a file cabinet, believe it or not. Yeah, I got to do this stuff, It's a one-man operation. And we briefly lost power here twice, which never happens. Although the really weird thing is we were set to have a major storm, regular thunderstorm here tonight, and we ended up missing it. But in the past, we changed to fiber optic internet here about a year ago. Before that time, if we had any sort of major storm at all, the internet would go out, and we weren't alone. I'm not going to say the name of the company. It's one of your friendly cable companies, but here in Minneapolis, if we got any sort of bad weather, which included a snowstorm, whatever it was, we would lose internet. Now, what's the point? That's when you want the internet, isn't it? But we switched over to fiber optic gigahertz internet about a year ago, and I gotta say, it's been fantastic. We've been down for an entire year. There was about a year ago we switched. We've been down 5 minutes in the entire year, and I've only had to reboot the thing twice, and once when that happened. So we did not get the storm past us, but I did find it kind of curious. I mean, we had flickering lights here twice last night, and that never happens here in Northeast Minneapolis. So I don't know if that has anything to do with what's going on or what. The point is the Earth revolves. I don't know if you know that. It revolves around the sun and it rotates. And so who knows what might happen next. But there's a possibility. Apparently, they have linked this thing nationwide or province-wide. Where I don't. Puerto Rico is not a state; it's a territory. Territory-wide. There we go. I fixed it. They are linking the blackout to the solar storm, supposedly. So we'll try to keep you up to speed on that. We're taking, we don't do shows on Friday. We're taking Monday off. We're going to have shows Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday next week. Our friend Larry Newman, bail bondsman and Bigfoot investigator, he's coming on Wednesday. I don't know who we got Tuesday or Thursday, but we got somebody. I'm taking Monday off. Yeah, I know this is really lame, but I got to go to the doctor on Monday afternoon, and if they give me some sort of drugs, I usually have an adverse reaction, and I just don't want to deal with it. I don't want to try doing a show. It's like no. So anyway, yeah, we're taking Monday off. And I got to be blunt with you folks. The banners say Monday through Thursday. We do this shows Monday and Thursday. Typically, we only do 3 shows a week, but I don't know from one week to next, I don't know which night we're taking off. So I tried changing that briefly and it didn't work. So anyway, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. So anyway, we're going to be talking to Jonathan Lockwood here in just a moment. Stay tuned for these messages and we'll be back with him. Hi all, Jim Peters again for Conk News. Let me tell you one of the greatest things about Conk News. It's free. It's completely and totally free. You don't need to register. You don't need to log in, subscribe, none of that stuff. Sure, they run a few ads on the front page, but if you're an old fogey like me, you might actually appreciate this because when you check out Conk News at conk.com, you'll probably notice that it's the closest thing to an old-fashioned hard copy newspaper that you'll find online. The latest up-to-the-minute news from 75 high-quality sources collected every 3 hours, all laid out with photos and headlines directly from the articles. And when you click on a story, you go directly to that story. No ad page, no interstitial page, none of that stuff. This is the way online news is meant to be. And did I mention that it's completely free? Seriously, how much of stuff in America is free now, right? That's of quality anyway. So check this out for yourself. It's at conk.com, CONK.com, Conk News. Joining us from his home in the D.C. area of America, Jonathan Lockwood, Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. How you doing, Jonathan? Nice to see you.
Just excellent. Glad to be here as always.
I'm going to rattle off a few of your stats here and credits. You attended the U.S. Military Academy as a cadet, 73-74. You retired from the U.S. Army as a colonel. You were working for the Office of Intelligence and Analysis of the Department of Homeland Security. You have an MA and PhD in International Affairs. You have a Master's in Science and Strategic Intelligence. That's what George W. Bush should call it, strategery.
Strategery, yeah.
From National Intelligence University and BA in History and Psychology from the University of Tampa. You've been publishing articles for the last 50 years, which means you're about my age. And you have two
when the continents were closer together.
That's right. That's correct. You have two books out right now, currently in circulation. That's the Lockwood Analytical Method for Prediction, which I definitely want to talk about, and the Russian View of U.S. Strategy, Its Past, Its Future, from 2017. All right. The first thing I got to ask you, Jonathan, are you under any, and I ask anybody who comes on this show who's connected to the military at all, are you under any security clearances where there's stuff you can't talk about right now?
Right now, my security clearance, although I am, if you look in the DISS system, the contracts that say that I am eligible, I'm currently eligible based on my background and history, eligible for to have a TSSCI clearance. Currently, I was read off of that, so currently I do not have active access to any classified information, which is just as well, because realistically, most intelligence, and this applies to virtually all intelligence organizations, where no matter where you are, most intelligence countries get about 80% of their intelligence from open sources. That's about the general rule.
Yeah.
The 20% from classified sources, and those can be from national technical means such as satellites, or they can be from human intelligence, from extensive spy networks. But that usually it's about 80-20. So, but a person who is skilled at open source intelligence analysis can usually get a pretty accurate picture of what's going on.
So you've written a book on U.S. Russian strategy, and you seem to know a little bit about the Ukraine situation. I'm going to set this up here. I'm going to talk for just a minute. I talk to my friends. I live in Minneapolis, very, very liberal city. The way I look at this, there's only three possible outcomes here. First of all, we keep on going the way we're doing and send them a bunch of money and don't actually send them any troops, and Ukraine ultimately loses, because it seems to be that's the only possible outcome in a because Russia is so freaking large. All right. Secondly, we could send troops and then we start World War III, or we settle with what's happened right now, and Russia ends up with some of Ukrainian territory, and my liberal friends say, well, that's not fair. And my answer to that is, well, life isn't fair. If you want fair, go to sleep and have a dream. So, am I wrong about any of this? Is there another possible solution?
There is another possible outcome.
All right. Okay.
Which my host on the Ukraine show, Sasha Starr, and I talk about, and his other co-host is based in Kiev, Ukraine, Ivan Kurichenko. And what we discuss the ongoing situation in the Russian-Ukrainian war, and one of the outcomes that we talk about and that I am pushing, which most others do not, is that the current Russian offensive efforts in Ukraine, they are steadily losing power. They are losing their ability they are still taking excessive casualties. Their logistics system, and keep in mind, most people ignore logistics or don't pay much attention to it, but the Ukrainians have been hitting Russian infrastructure and logistics systems, and as what's really noticeable in one clip, it shows the Russians are using not motorized vehicles to bring up their supplies. They're using donkeys.
No shit.
Their logistics system has been so degraded that they are forced to using anything they can get. They don't. Okay.
I got to stop you for a second there. Sure. Is the problem that they're running out of money? Are they running out of troops?
They're both. They're running out of money. And President Trump, to his credit, which is not very well noticed, he is exacerbating their problem with his drill baby drill policy, and trying to drop the price of energy, drop the price of oil.
Right.
The price of oil for the Russians is already net down to $50 a barrel.
Right.
That is below the level that they need in order to sustain their budget, in order to monetarily keep the war effort going. The Russians do not have, their currency is not the world's reserve currency, the way the US dollar is. And instead, what happens is the Russians, they have to pay as they go in order to be able to keep their war machine running. So right now they are running out of steam monetarily. They are the mere fact that they have say they have North Korean troops being provided, a few Chinese apparently, and what this reminds me of when Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union during World War II. They also had some allies with them, Romanian allies, and some Finnish to a certain extent. But beginning in 1942, the Germans had taken such losses that there started appearing on the Eastern Front Hungarian and Italian troops, Italian corps, which they used to help their offensive. And that really hurt the Germans in their offensive towards Stalingrad in 1942, where the Hungarians and Italians were essentially guarding the flanks of their German Sixth Army. The Russians hit those flanks and managed to trap the German Sixth Army in Stalingrad, and that led to the decisive defeat of the Germans. And so what's fascinating about this is that the Russians are now running into the same problem that the Germans ran into in their offensive. It's now the problem is reversed, and so their offensive is losing strength. And what I have been contending all along in the Russian-Ukrainian war is that the true center of gravity, the true focus, the true decisive battlefield in this entire conflict is not the eastern provinces of Ukraine, where the Russians are making incremental gains and taking high casualties. The real focus of this, the decisive battle, will be Crimea. If the Ukrainians have been steadily hammering away at the Kerch Bridge and setting the Russians up for isolation of the Russian occupiers of Crimea from the rest of, cutting them off from reinforcements and supplies. And what the Ukrainians are waiting for, they're waiting for the proper moment to launch a counteroffensive with their strategic reserves that they create for this purpose, to cut off the Crimea from reinforcement and compel the Russian occupier. They can then launch a counteroffensive with their reserves that they've created and force the Russian occupiers to surrender in Crimea.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, my impression was, am I wrong about this, that Russia already had Crimea, right?
Well, they do. They illegally occupied it in 2014.
Right. Yeah.
And the Ukrainians have been steadily degrading the Crimea's usefulness to Russia. Their naval fleet, the Russian naval fleet in the Black Sea, has been pretty much rendered irrelevant. And so now it's a question of, at what moment will Ukraine launch a decisive counteroffensive, which the most observers in the West are not anticipating. They think that Crimea is in Russia's pocket. It is not. It is something which, if it is the prime prize for Russia to be able to retain Crimea and also be able to take over the whole of Ukraine. But if the Ukrainians can, at the moment of their choosing, launch a successful counteroffensive to retake the Crimea, then that changes the entire complexion of the war. It inflicts a decisive operational defeat upon Russia, which they will not be able to explain away. They can't say, "Oh, we meant to do that," and that will change the entire game, in which Ukraine will be able to say, "Okay, now we're ready for a ceasefire." And
right. So, is this one of the reasons that oh God, I forgot his name. The guy, the president of Ukraine,
Zelensky.
Yeah, Zelensky. Is this one of the reasons he's been running around? And for lack of a better term, he seems kind of desperate about the money because they're planning on doing this. Is this one of the reasons?
That could well be. Remember, we can't see all the cards.
Oh.
This is not a poker game where all the cards are face up.
But you're on here. You're on our show because you see more of the cards than me and most other people.
Like I can infer based upon my wargaming experience and based upon my study of history and parallels and things that I see that are alike in previous conflicts and see how they
Right.
apply to the current
So
situation.
the way I got this from is, am I getting this straight? Is you're saying that if they were to do this counteroffensive, they basically the war would still end, but they'd have a much better negotiating position for taking
Yes.
back pretty much
Because
all
then if the Ukrainians take Crimea back, then the only occupied areas that Russia has are those eastern provinces in Ukraine, those 4 oblasts.
right.
And this makes this problem much simpler for Ukraine, because then they don't have to worry about Crimea being under Russian control. They would then be able to concentrate their forces more readily against the Russians in the east. And this would greatly complicate Vladimir Putin's problem. And again, when you couple that with the other pressures being applied against Russia, such as the European Union, for example, they have declared that the economic sanctions against Russia, which they already have in place, those will not be lifted unless Russia withdraws from all Ukrainian territories. Russia is not going to do that. Therefore, the sanctions will continue. The economic pressure will continue there. And President Trump has said to words to the effect that he is really pissed that Russia has not agreed to a ceasefire. Russia is still asserting these maximalist demands, practically demanding what amounts to unconditional surrender on the part of the West. And people like Lavrov have been saying that NATO should be dissolved. I mean, this is it's insane what they're demanding. They're demanding the surrender of the West.
That's insane. But on the other hand, is there any reason there militarily or tactically that Russia would stop the war? You know, I mean, they're just going to keep on coming until literally they're
going to keep on coming if their resources are not limitless.
Yeah,
and the longer they keep up this war in sustaining these casualties, they are going. Even if they were to stop now, they are going to have severe demographic problems once the war ends, in terms of birth rate, in terms of recovering their economy, all sorts of problems. And the longer they continue, the worse it's going to get.
And Putin has the same problem that Xi has in China, and that is, even though they are effectively dictatorships, you still have to keep the populace more content to some degree, otherwise they're going to revolt. You know, right? So now
Xi has to worry about what the Chinese call losing the mandate of heaven.
Yeah, right. That's right. The reports coming out of Ukraine and Russia are that the Russian troops have a real bad morale problem. Is that what you're hearing too?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. How many lives have been lost on either side right now? Like at least 100,000 on either side. Is that right?
It's getting close to 1 million for the Russians.
Oh, Jesus.
And maybe although the Ukrainians are very circumspect about their relative casualty rate, it's probably the Ukrainian casualty rate is probably maybe 1/5 in terms of military casualties.
Yeah.
Of course, that does not factor in the civilian casualties, which, by the way, is why the Russians are continuing to hammer away and inflict civilian casualties. It is a tacit admission of military defeat, because if you will recall, during World War II, during the Battle of Britain, when the German Luftwaffe was hammering away at Britain's fighter command, and it was looking very grim for the British until the British Bomber Command did a night bombing of Berlin, and that infuriated Hitler, so that he, in turn, ordered the bombing of London. They shifted their focus from fighter command, where they were winning, really, and they shifted their focus onto bombing of London, trying to break the morale of the British people. Well, that failed miserably. If anything, it galvanized the British.
Right.
And so the fact that the Russians are continuing to engage in these missile attacks, trying to kill civilians, it's indiscriminate. What it is doing is galvanizing the morale of the Ukrainians. It is not making the Russians any friends in the West.
So, Jonathan, let's get back to my original 3 scenarios. You're saying the fourth scenario is that there is a ceasefire, but basically Ukraine comes out with pretty much or Russia gets almost nothing, right?
Yeah.
And in that sense,
Yeah, exactly. The thing we must avoid here in order to preserve the peace for the intermediate is long term is we cannot have a peace or a ceasefire that visibly rewards Russia in any way for having begun the conflict.
right.
If you anything that does any agreement that does that is not a peace treaty. It is a treaty of appeasement.
Right.
Very similar to Neville Chamberlain in 1938 when Munich, when he was waving this piece of paper declaring peace for our time. That was wrong.
Well, yeah.
And a lot of Europeans who have better historical memories than we do, they remember that. They know what appeasement costs.
I'm actually glad you brought up World War II here, because I was talking to a caller of last week or something like that, and we were and I've always wondered about this. So I mean, I know a little bit about World War II history, but not as much as you or a lot of other people. It seems to me that if Hitler had basically ignored England and not gone into Russia and just tried to take over Europe, he would have succeeded. Am I right about that?
It would have made. Now that's a fascinating question, because I do a lot of what if wargaming and the decades of wargaming, and of course my favorite period is World War II.
Right.
Is that if the key you have to remember here is that the United States, in order to defeat Nazi Germany, they knew that first they had to maintain and ensure control of the sea. And that's in order so that the United States could get supplies across to Great Britain, build up supplies in Great Britain for what eventually would become the cross-channel attack into Europe.
Right.
And Nazi Germany knew that they had to, with their sea denial strategy, using U-boats, land-based air, and their commerce raiders, such as the Bismarck, the Tirpitz, and other ships, trying to disrupt the supply line to Great Britain in order to hopefully force its surrender. So they could have, as you say, not tried to invade Great Britain, although there is a scenario if they were not totally serious or focused in their attempt to create the conditions for Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Great Britain. It would have taken a much more focused and all-out effort, and they would have to have not invaded the Soviet Union, concentrated on Great Britain first and keeping them away from Germany. Because once the U.S. had secured the sea supply to Great Britain and had begun to build up air power and troops and making Great Britain into a great springboard for the invasion of Europe, the game was pretty much up for Nazi Germany. So,
but am I wrong about this? It seems to me that at least the primary goal of Hitler was to turn Europe into basically a German version of the United States, Germania, And so, okay, if you're going to do that, why even bother with Russia and Britain and even Northern Africa?
Russia was his fatal mistake. North Africa, not necessarily, because North Africa, if he could have, concentrate enough in logistics, because that was a logistical challenge in North Africa. If he could have concentrated on bombing Malta to secure the supply lines to North Africa, prevent the British from interdicting supplies to North Africa, so that the Germans and Italians could have launched an offensive into Egypt, taken the Suez Canal, penetrated into the Middle East, which is what a lot of Allied powers were afraid of, and thus turning the Mediterranean Sea into a German lake. That would have been a much different scenario and much more along the lines of what you're thinking. So that would have been a very viable scenario. And then once the Mediterranean is secured, so long as Hitler maintained a viable force in the East, which could deter Joseph Stalin from wanting to attack West, and just then Hitler could have focused on then waging war against Great Britain, and hopefully reducing it or preventing the United States from using Great Britain as a springboard for invading Europe. At the very least, it would have been a longer war, And ultimately, what it would have resulted in was that the United States, because remember, they were working on the atomic bomb,
Yeah.
they would have ultimately would have eventually resulted in the United States developing the atomic bomb, because originally they were thinking of that the atomic bomb was for use against Germany, not Japan. They weren't expecting Germany to fall first. So it was just Germany's good luck, so to speak, that they were defeated first and did not have to have the atomic bomb used against them.
All the World War II historians I talked to basically seem to agree that the Allies barely won. This is that, we won by the skin of our teeth.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I think that when the United States remember, the United States resources in World War II, although quite considerable, impressive, they were not unlimited. So they had to determine what resources are we going to devote to the Navy. They decided that the Navy gets first call, and then they decided, okay, what do we need next? We need air supremacy. So they allocate a significant amount of resources to developing air power. So you've got naval air power. So what happens to the Army? The Army, you have to practice economy of force. They mobilized enough personnel for the Army to create a 90-division Army. Okay, 90 divisions sounds impressive until when you get to the fact that it's got to be allocated in 2 theaters. Pacific and the idea was Germany first, defeat Germany first, then transfer forces from the Atlantic theater to the Pacific theater, and then execute operations Olympic and Coronet to invade Japan. So that's the way it was looking. And to give you an idea how close it was, by the time of the Battle of the Bulge, when the Germans launched their counteroffensive on December 1944, the U.S. had just committed its last divisions to the European theater. The Battle of the Bulge and the war in Europe had to be won with the forces they had left. They had no strategic reserve left to commit. Yeah, so yes, the historians are committed. They just barely won it.
I know a little bit more about the atomic bomb in Japan, mostly because I'm into the science part of it, the atomic part, rather than, and we talk about this on the show regularly about the fact that, what Japan didn't know is we only had 2 bombs. And we used them.
And I love what President Truman said. You remember when he said that if the Japanese will not, they can expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen before upon this earth. I love it. he hit them with 2 atomic bombs, and the Japanese said, "That's it.
They thought they were going to give up after 1, didn't they? They were surprised that
that the Japanese were still standing after 1. But the Japanese were just like, what did they just hit us with?
Yeah, right.
And when the second atomic bomb hit, and the Japanese obviously saw the results, there was no countering this divine wind from America's laboratories.
Right, but if they had said in an alternate universe, and actually, I want to get to your book here about the Lockwood analytical method for prediction, because I love the idea of alternate histories or alternate outcomes.
Well, alternate histories. Because I play off the idea of, you've seen all these wonderful books about alternate histories. What if history had gone a certain way? What I do is I flip it, and my method involves alternate futures. So what events need to occur in our present in order to lead to a specific alternate future? My book gets into it in a much more complicated fashion, but the core philosophy of my LAMP book, of the Lockwood Analytical Method for Prediction, can be summed up as this: the future is the sum total of interactions of free will. Every action at every moment in time by every person who has ever lived has either a subtle or a dramatic effect on the future. It has effects. There is no such thing as an action that has no consequences.
That's kind of the political version of the butterfly effect, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there is no such thing as an action with no consequences. Yeah, but the most obvious example is, okay, say you, for example, you're a political leader at a rally, and you turn your head to look at a chart.
Yeah.
A mere split second before a would-be assassin's bullet that was intended to go through your head instead goes through your right ear.
Yeah. Right.
President Trump's decision in that moment of space and time, he had to turn your head or not turn your head.
Right.
And no matter which decision he makes, the consequences have a dramatic effect on not only his personal future, but the future of America and quite arguably the world.
Yeah, but there's an interesting thing about that too, Jonathan, and that is he made that decision without knowing what was going on. You know what I mean? He didn't know that was going to be a life-changing event for him. He's just looking at a chart, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And so this is really interesting to me, because how does it, in your theory here or analysis, how does, you talked about free will. What about, okay, now I'm not talking about the lack of free will, but what about just for lack of better, just
act of God?
Yeah, or chance, right? What about that?
I was once asked by a student in one of my classes, and I include this in the book, by the way, in a footnote, where I was once asked by a student what the role of God was in the interaction of free will, and what my philosophy is that I consider God to be the ultimate free will actor, capable of acting at any point in space or time, at any point in history at his choosing. But because we, as finite human beings, cannot begin to comprehend, let alone predict, the actions of an infinite God, therefore the future is to that extent inherently unknowable. So therefore, any practitioner of the lamp method must assume that God will choose not to intervene in any given situation.
Right.
And this works, by the way, for whether the analyst is an atheist or a Christian, because the atheist is saying, well, there is no God. The lamp is basically allowing for it, saying God does not exist, therefore I can just concentrate on the actors and what they're likely to do. And the Christian is saying, okay, well, God is choosing not to intervene in this particular problem, therefore I can apply the lamp method and assume that there's just the interactions of free will. It works either way. But it philosophically as well as theologically accounts for the action or inaction of an infinite God.
So, Jonathan, I didn't read the book, but I did read about it. And what struck me is the parallels to what you're talking about to quantum mechanics. And I don't know how familiar you are with that sort of thing, but you know, quantum mechanics is basically based on probabilities. And so your prediction method is based on the probability of something that happening, not actually predicting it, right? Am I right about that?
You're quite close. It's essentially, I could talk about relative probabilities, not absolute probabilities.
What would be the difference then?
The difference in relative probability and absolute probability, traditional probability theory assumes that you know the entire universe of possible events that can happen, such as the way in which 3 coins can come up heads or tails. You know that there are 8 possible combinations. But when free will is entered into the picture, you no longer know the entire potential universe. The coins all have minds of their own. So you have you get the future as a spectrum of constantly changing relative probabilities that changes. The relative probability changes every time an actor makes or does not make a particular decision. So it's constantly in a state, it's infinitely fluid and dynamic. So what the lamp method tries to do is basically the analyst is saying, okay, based upon everything I know up to this moment in time, which of these alternate futures is more likely to happen than the other? And you rank order them constantly. As you get new information, the analysts are revoting the likelihood of alternate futures for your given problem. And interestingly enough, the lamp method has been is considered by the Defense Intelligence Agency to be a classical methodology. It is still in use, apparently.
Well, that doesn't surprise me because it's extremely rational. I mean, there's
my dad told me. He's gone now, but the my dad told me he had read over my lamp method. He said what I had done essentially was I took matrix theory and upgunned it for the 21st century.
You're talking about what is
matrix theory?
What is that? You're talking about not talking about the movie, are you?
No, not at all.
No.
You would have to Google it and look up matrix theory.
I will do that. Okay.
It's beyond the scope of it. But matrix, matrix theory. But what my dad's contending is that because he's from obviously an older school, he said that basically taking matrix theory and upgunned it and improved it to make it adaptable to 21st century. And I was like, well, great. I'm glad I did it, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but in any case, I found out from one of my students that over at the Defense Intelligence Agency, I have acquired, apparently in their classes, I've acquired a nickname. They call me the Godfather of Analytics. So
that's pretty cool.
Okay. Yeah. So
Does that make you feel old?
The Godfather of Analytics. I said, oh, yes, right. I've still got all 10 of my marbles.
That's right. Hey, let's talk about the Space Force. Okay, first thing I have to ask you, because one of my specialties on this program and just life is general is not just UFOs, but the UFO political situation, which I find almost more fascinating than the actual hardware flying around, or the allegedly flying around, but I contend it's flying around. So the thing is, there have been rumors for years that we've had a secret Space Force going back decades. Do you know anything about that? Or either way?
No.
You think that
right now the U.S. Space Force, and I have some critical remarks about the way apparently the U.S. Space Force regards itself or regards space, because I participated in some war games back in 1997, which simulated the first war in space. As it turns out, it's simulating a war in 2020. And what's interesting is that that war game did not simulate the existence of a space force. It was assuming at the time that the U.S. would have uncontested control of and access to Earth orbital space. And both sides in that war game had laser-armed satellites and counterspace satellites. And what that war game had inadvertently created was a Mexican standoff in low Earth orbit. An unstable hair trigger situation in which the side that fired first would have a decisive advantage. And in the war game, the red team, of which I was a part, we decided to launch a preemptive strike in space to take out blue's communications and intelligence satellites. We succeeded, and the war game controllers told us that absent their intervention, red, the bad guys, Russia, had just won the war. Well, they said that was unacceptable to the powers that be, so they restarted the war game. They moved the war game back, and then essentially said, well, the red attacks in space with their counterspace satellites weren't as effective as originally projected. And so we thought this was a whitewash. So we went, the red president asked me, what can we do about this? So I went to our ASAT guys and I said, okay, how many ASATs do we have left? We have 30. I said, good, put high-yield nuclear warheads on them. Let's put them in orbit. So in the war game, we put 30 high-yield nuclear weapons in orbit on those satellites and detonated them all simultaneously. What that effectively did was zero out space. It destroyed the entire global space infrastructure. And did it destroy like the stratosphere or any of no?
No, it didn't.
It created an event which the war game itself could not simulate.
Okay. The
collapse of the global economic infrastructure due to the destruction of the space infrastructure. Right. And the war game leaders and the after action report, they acknowledged that the red attacks in space took us back to 1950 in terms of technology. And that is the danger we have here. that right now, if you look at the U.S. Space Force in open sources and in interviews, the U.S. Space Force controls 75 satellites. Okay. From the Russian and Chinese perspective, that is not a space force. That is a set of 75 targets that waiting to be disrupted.
Right.
So Donald Rumsfeld had warned in a study of his back in about 2000 or so, he had warned of the potential for a Pearl Harbor in space. That danger still is even greater now than it was then, because the Chinese have been practicing anti-satellite maneuvers, apparently, with their counterspace satellites. So you have, and Russia certainly has that same capability as well. So the potential exists here if the Chinese, particularly if the Chinese feel that their backs are to the wall. This is what disturbs me about the current situation with the tariffs. President Trump's tariffs are going to do a great deal of damage to the Chinese economy. And
Jonathan, that's the idea, right?
That's the idea.
Right.
The idea is to force China to come to the table and stop exploiting the United States. And the danger is that the Chinese leadership might get in such a desperate frame of mind that they might feel they have to lash out militarily with whatever military forces they feel they have at some advantage in an effort to redress the situation. So an attack in space is not entirely out of the question for the Chinese. It would be a counter space attack directed at our 75 satellites.
Jonathan, I have so many questions here, I can barely keep track in my head. First one, though, is as a military historian, now you look at this, okay, for millennia, the idea of war was to kill as many people as possible, right? I mean, that was you were the winner if you killed more people as a general rule.
Well, okay. Basically, you could, would you believe that in the Bible, Jesus actually used an example where he talked about not undertaking something unless you count the cost. And I'm trying to remember the exact book in which it's located in the Gospels, but he talked about, or what king, seeing another king with an army of 20,000 men that cometh against him, sitteth not first down with his counselors and determine whether he be able with his army of 10,000 men to defeat him that cometh against him with 20,000 men. And then if he determined that he not be able to do it, to send out envoys while the enemy is yet afar off to discuss terms of peace. Jesus was actually discussing, and I pointed this out, Jesus was actually speaking favorably of what we would now call the wargaming process.
Right. And well, the thing about Jesus is whether you buy the fact he was a son of God or not, he was a brilliant man. There's no doubt about that.
He had insight. He had insights into human nature and into life in general that no one else was.
The reason I brought all this up is because now you're talking about a war in space, and also I find it kind of interesting because you're going back to 1997, this war game, and I was talking about a quote unquote secret space force. Maybe it wasn't that secret. I mean, in some ways, it existed before 2019.
Again, I do not have access to all all those things. But
you were obviously working on this 20 years before it actually became official.
Yes.
But my point is, we're talking about fighting wars by proxy. We have drones, we have stuff in space, and the idea isn't to kill people. The idea is to decimate the mechanics of war of the other side and kind of as a proxy of, well, we could kill your people too, So no.
If we were to gain superior, one of the things I advocate. You're talking, about the Golden Dome project of President Trump, where he wants to basically protect America from intercontinental nuclear attack. Yeah. Now, the problem with the Golden Dome is it's got a hole in it, which is acknowledged at least tacitly by the proponents of the Golden Dome bill, because the Golden Dome our defenses are not able to block an intercontinental nuclear attack, because Israel only has to worry about short range and intermediate range ballistic missiles. We have to worry about intercontinental ballistic missiles, and our ballistic missile defense systems are not able to destroy those kinds of missiles in their boost phase, which is how you would have to do it. And so they're talking about Elon Musk, and they're talking about putting up hundreds of satellites armed with lasers and missiles and things like that. And what they're proposing to do would essentially be to create the same situation that existed in the 1997 Winter War game, where you have hair trigger situation, satellite versus satellite. You know the way you stop that problem?
How?
You upgrade the Space Force with a space fleet. You would have the Pentagon saying to Elon Musk and SpaceX, Elon, we would like to buy 12 of your Falcon 9s, 12 of your Falcon Heavies, and 12 of your Starships. Give them a manned space fleet armed with lasers, in which the Starships themselves become the orbiting platforms, manning the laser weapons and being able to destroy the Russian and Chinese counterspace satellites. The difference here is that if you just have satellites killing satellites, nobody cares because satellites don't have mothers.
Well, that's right. That's exactly the reason I brought this up. Correct. Right.
Exactly right. But if you have starships manned by guardians of the U.S. Space Force they're on orbit, forming this forming the Golden Dome, and being able to shoot down nuclear missiles in their boost phase, now you have something that's not only much more effective at protecting America, but the great fear of the Russian and, by extension, the Chinese military and political leadership, the thing they fear more than anything else, even though they won't directly admit it, they fear the potential of American technology to neutralize the one thing that makes them great powers in their own perception, their nuclear missile arsenals.
Well, the other thing is, in talking about China, and this is, I'm really glad that the president seems to want to address this issue, because the thing that pisses me off is that China has been stealing from us literally for years and years. I mean, their culture does not encourage any sort of creativity, so they can't really come up with anything, and so they end up stealing stuff from. Well, this just happened with a hypersonic missile just recently. They stole our plans and then built the missile before we did, and I don't know if that shows their ingenuity or our incompetence. I don't know, but I mean, but the fact of the matter is, we designed it. I mean,
and we can come up with a counter to it.
Yeah, we can. But the fact that they steal everything, they steal their intellectual property just blind.
And President Trump is now putting in motion plans to put a stop to that.
Yeah.
And in effect, to reindustrialize America and give ourselves our own, have us designing and building our own stuff, pretty much the way we did at the end of World War II. And we were producing had about over 50% of the manufacturing capacity of the world at the end of World War II.
Yeah. Also, it's a real testament to capitalism and American ingenuity that we got together for the war effort so quickly. I mean, we were building Ford was building like something 120 airplanes a day, and something like that.
Matter of fact, the average number of aircraft during World War II built by the United States was something like 60,000 aircraft.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
It is, and the United States had this massive industrial capability. And the statistic that absolutely stuns me the most, the Liberty ship. The Liberty ship, a supply ship that was carrying supplies across the Atlantic and the Pacific. The workhorse of the supply effort, the Liberty ship. You know how many Liberty ships were being produced?
No.
At the peak effort? They were doing it in an assembly line fashion. They had this assembly line for producing a Liberty ship from start to finish. And at the peak production level, the one Liberty ship, starting at the beginning of the assembly line and going to the end, one Liberty ship was being built and rolled off into the water. One Liberty ship every 60 minutes.
And
per hour.
And it isn't just that we did that; it's that we got that together so quickly. I mean, that's before Pearl Harbor, nobody's really thinking about much. It's
We had all this untapped. We had this huge untapped reservoir of productive capability, which needed an outlet in order to pull us out of the Great Depression. And ironically enough, it took World War II, the largest war in recorded human history, to pull us out of that Great Depression and fully mobilize the American economic and industrial potential.
So,
and then afterwards, we were lucky enough to be able to adapt that industrial potential and convert it to production of consumer goods so that the American people could go shopping.
So let's go back to the tariffs, the current tariffs. Now, people talk about this. I actually do think President Trump's playing 4D chess here. It seems to me the goal of this exercise is actually to isolate Russia or China. I mean, so the way I look at this, and getting back to actually your lamp theory again, is this is probably going to work, but it's not guaranteed, especially because if something comes along that's completely unpredictable, unexpected, it could throw the whole thing in the kabooey. But is that then the way you see this too?
Oh, it is. And what President Trump is doing, several analysts have looked at this and said that what President Trump is doing is he's trying to reset this back to, if you go back far enough, back to what Thomas Jefferson had in 1805 when he was able to declare that no American is taxed on anything. All the income for the United States came from tariffs.
Oh, man. Hold it. I gotta stop you, Jonathan, because I have economists on the show. This is a constant topic of conversation. Income tax started in 1915, and it was 2%, and now the top's 38% or whatever the heck it is.
Yep.
I mean, this is crazy. And the fact is, it appears we could run the country without income tax. It appears that's possible, but no one can seem to get their shit together to actually do it so far. And
that is what President Trump is working toward.
Yeah, I know. And it'll be if he can pull this off, it'll be absolutely amazing.
If he pulls this off, he's going up on Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, I agree totally.
And his biggest complaint is to make sure you get somebody who gets my hair right. He'll be pissed if that sculpture messes up his hair.
Oh man. Hey, okay, so I'm gonna. I tell you what. Let's end this. I've really enjoyed this conversation, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so like I said,
if you have me back, there are other things that I can talk about.
I'm going to have you back for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We only got started here. But I do have to ask you: do you buy any of the UFO stuff at all? What is your position on this?
My position on UFOs is that dealing with the question of UFOs would have to fall to Space Force intelligence. They would have to explore out. They would have to look at a circumference of about, say 125 light years, because that's as far as our radio signals have gone out.
Right.
During the period, in order for an alien civilization to know we are here. And as I would recommend to your listeners, a fellow by the name of John Michael Godier, Godier. He has a series of YouTube presentations dealing with the general theme of this all aspects of this amazing universe in which we live. And 3 of his YouTube podcasts are, I would recommend most highly of. The first one is called 10 Reasons Aliens Might Want to Invade Earth. The second run is 10 Reasons Aliens Might Not Want to Invade Earth.
Yeah.
And then the third and most instructive is, which I think is very insightful on his part, he is, by the way, a science fiction author and futurist. So the third one is entitled, Can Alien Civilizations Detect Us? Those 3 I would highly recommend to your listeners. You can check them out yourself. On YouTube. Yeah.
Jonathan, but the things that have been reported, like from the U.S. Nimitz and the Roosevelt and these devices have been flying around now, the military's position now is that these are definitively actual flying machines. That's what they've said. So what are they? In your opinion, what are they and where are they from?
I would be hesitant to even speculate on that. My guess is it's highly sensitive demonstrations of highly sensitive technology, at which the military and the government are simply providing cover stories.
That's, believe it or not, that's what I think too. Although you might think I'm nuts. I think we have that technology because we've reverse engineered crashed extraterrestrial spacecraft.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually think most of them are ours. I do, and they're certainly not Russia or China. Russia doesn't.
We may have some well concealed aces up our sleeve.
Yeah, because I figure if it was China, they would have used them already. That's the way I look at this. I don't know, but, you know more about strategic planning than I do, but I mean, do you think that's true? If China had that stuff, would they?
If they have or even if they've explored us, they don't appear to have the economic infrastructure to support their development in any significant numbers.
Right.
They have significant economic weaknesses. They don't have the creativity or the innovation necessarily to be able to employ them effectively. So I would say that right now, even their current manned spacecraft, their attempt at a space station that they have in Earth orbit, okay, it looks flashy, but that's not necessarily a space fleet that's going to control Earth orbital space. It's their space power is more symbolic than real at this point.
Yeah, and
they're essentially a space denial power.
Yeah, right. I'm so cynical that I think that anything they put up, they basically stole from us. That's my cynicism. I don't know. That's me.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed talking with you, man. This is fantastic.
No, it's fun.
Hope you come back.
Oh, I'll be available. Right now, I'm in a position where I'm able to engage in these podcasts, and I'm engaging in others as well. And hopefully, these ideas will eventually reach the threshold of awareness, not just of other, say, major networks, but hopefully of the Trump administration as well. Because again, the trajectory on which they are going is promising, but also dangerous.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly the way I look at it too. Like I said, I think success is probable but not guaranteed. That's the way
exactly
I look
right.
at it.
We can still fumble. We're driving toward the goal line, but we can still fumble the football.
That's right. Jonathan, you take care of yourself. We'll talk to you soon. Just a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi all, Jim Peters again for Conch News. Let me tell you one of the greatest things about Conch News. It's free. It's completely and totally free. You don't need to register. You don't need to log in, subscribe, none of that stuff. Sure, they run a few ads on the front page, but if you're an old fogey like me, you might actually appreciate this because when you check out Conch News at conch.com, you'll probably notice that it's the closest thing to an old-fashioned hard copy newspaper that you'll find online. The latest up-to-the-minute news from 75 high-quality sources collected every 3 hours, all laid out with photos and headlines directly from the articles. And when you click on a story, you go directly to that story. No ad page, no interstitial page, none of that stuff. This is the way online news is meant to be. And did I mention that it's completely free? Seriously, how much of the stuff in America is free now, right? That's of quality anyway. So check this out for yourself. It's at conch.com, CONK.com. Conch News. Man, I'm such a goofball. I don't know. I'm watching myself during talking to Jonathan Lockwood. I just look like a dork on the screen, And then now the thing is, we got a bug in our system here. It's just a very, very minor thing, but because we're showing the Conch News front page in real time. In other words, what you're seeing on the screen is exactly what you see if you logged in at that moment, right? It's not a recording. It's not a commercial. Because of that, to run the sound, I have to keep my picture, my image, my camera on the screen. That's the reason. It's stupid, but yeah, it's true. We found that out because we did these commercials 10 or 20 times in a row and realized the sound was not recording. And then we finally, it took me like 3 hours to figure out why, but that's the reason. So yeah, so you get to look at me while the sound is running and the front page of Conch is up in real time. That's the reason. I want to thank Jonathan Lockwood for coming on. Fabulous interview. Really, really enlightening. The guy knows his stuff, you know. I shouldn't say this because he might take it as it's nice to have old guys who know a few things, you know. I mean, I don't know. That's the way. And also, you know, at the very end, he referred to this as a podcast. I still haven't figured out if this is a podcast or not. We do this live. It's a live show. We take live phone calls. Usually podcasts don't do that. We've been doing this live for 2 years. When we started, there weren't many people that were doing live video on the internet, relatively speaking anyway. And now everybody's doing it. I mean, most podcasts now have a video feed, but they're recorded too. So I don't know, you know, I would, you know, my boyfriend, Bill O'Reilly, he's always reminding people I don't do a podcast, to do a broadcast. And that's kind of the way I look at this too. So I don't know. So we got our regular caller, Think, is going to call in sometime here to tell us about his little adventure in upstate New York to the Willard Insane Asylum, which is no longer running. But he said that I think it's run by the National Park Service now. It's a historic site. And he said the staff there, they're just crazy about the fact that there's there's paranormal crap going on all over the place. So, and I think this is him. I gotta wait for the system to kind of. We got a very complex system here about taking phone calls. I do all this myself, you know. So I'm directing the show. I'm taking the phone calls. We got auto screener. Let me see if I can put them on. Hey, Think, is that you?
Yep. Hey, Jim. How's it going?
Hey, good. Yourself?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
What's new in your world?
Not. Well, before I begin, what I wanted to say, did you know that they just found molecules in space that indicate life?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so I'm planet K218b, right?
Right.
I was writing this down. Yeah.
Right.
That's incredible, isn't it? They're finding life out there.
Yeah. Now they're really okay. So they've had this ability for quite a while. This is the first time anything's really kind of panned out by the they can do by spectrogram, spectrography. They can tell what's in the atmosphere of. We have about a range of about just like I don't know if you heard the interview with Jonathan Lockwood. He referred to this. We have a range of about 150 light years or 125 light years here. And this thing is exactly basically 125 light years away. And they can tell by the spectrograph what the atmospheric composition is of that planet. And from that, they can tell, because certain molecules only end up in the atmosphere if they're produced by living organisms, they can tell if there's life on the planet. So that's how this works. The one thing, you know, Think, it's funny you should mention that, because that was actually going to be my filler if you didn't call in right away, because I'm watching the cable news this afternoon and I saw on two different channels. I saw two different anchors say they talk about the story, and they said the exact same words, and they said, you know, I don't know if I like this. And then Dana Perino's on the 5, and she says, I don't believe this at all. She doesn't buy any of it. She thinks it's all BS. There's no life out there. I don't understand, you know, there's like a billion stars or 100 billion stars just in the Milky Way galaxy. They've already figured out that there's an average of one planet for every star. There's about 100 billion planets just in our galaxy alone. Yeah, you're going to tell me this didn't happen again? I mean, I don't know. I don't understand why people have such a hard time wrapping their mind around it, but do you know?
that's a really good question. What makes people not believe that there's life out there? I mean, we have objects constantly hitting this planet. I mean, it's obvious we're not alone here. There's more to the universe than just this one planet.
Yeah.
And for someone to not believe that it makes no sense. Like, why?
No, it doesn't.
I would say religion, maybe.
Oh,
Maybe religion is. Go ahead, Jim, please.
Try this. How about ego? I think people don't want, because the thing is, if we run into non-intelligent life, like there might not be intelligent life on this planet. It might be just, plants and trees or something similar. But if we run into intelligent life, there's a good possibility. Astronomically, our solar system isn't that old. And so there's a good possibility that if we run an intelligent life, it's going to be older than us. And that means it's probably going to be more advanced. And I think that scares the crap out of people.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Definitely. I would definitely agree with that. And oh my God. I said it before in your show. I'm going to say it again. I think everyone should believe in the Bible. Everyone should believe in God. But there's specific people I believe should be allowed to think outside that. And I believe that I open up more possibilities when I disregard that we have a God, a single one being that overlooks everything. I believe that the universe is more complex than one being, a person or an entity. People often say this entity is a him. He is overlooking everything. I don't believe that. I think the universe is complex, super, super complex, and it's not an intelligent design. I believe that everything is based off random, and it's not as simplistic as a lot of these religions make it out to be.
But think,
especially the monotheism.
Weren't we just talking a couple of weeks ago or something where you told me, where you kind of agreed with me when I said that DNA is so complex, it's kind of like, Francis Crick, the guy who discovered it, said he didn't think it could be done by chance. It was so complicated. I thought, so did I understood you, or did we, do you think that's true?
I'm really open-minded to everything. I try not to close my mind. So if you had said that, and I remember you saying that, and I would agree, like that is a possibility. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just like that there is no God is a possibility, and there is a God is a possibility. I don't know any of this for sure, but in terms of what I know, I would say that I would lean more towards the fact that the universe is larger than one entity controlling everything.
Unless
I definitely don't. Yeah. Go ahead.
Unless it's some giant computer game being run by some 14-year-old kid in their mom's basement. I mean,
That could be.
The whole thing, the whole universe is in somebody's machine. It's Go ahead.
I was told that if we were to enter in a black hole, right, and if we were to survive it, that we would see the end of time once we cross over that black hole.
Yeah.
So basically, the opposite side of the black hole is the end of time, right there. If we were to see it, it's just so complex for us to understand. I don't think we could wrap our minds around it with our feeble understanding right now. When we try to understand, do you know the theory of forms? I think that's what it's called, theory of forms. We put a name to things so that we can understand it. Like we say a table is a table so that we can understand that's a table. That's what it's supposed to be used for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But in all honesty, you could use it for a whole bunch of different things. If you get rid of the name table, you can understand that you could use it for a lot of things, like firewood. It could be firewood. If you flip it upside down, it could be like a bench that you can sit on.
Or
it's more to it. And so
it could be a sex platform.
Yeah, a sex platform, all kinds of different things. And so we have mathematics so that we can understand the universe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what we use to try to understand the universe. But maybe and we're adding more and more to the mathematics, I think, slowly. The formulas to try to understand, but it's much more complex than what we know. I think it's much more.
We don't know crap. We don't know anything. We're just getting started.
Yeah. That's right.
I mean,
That's right.
you know,
We are
what humans
just
have been
getting started.
around for about 200,000 years. I mean, seriously, we only figured out relatively 100 years ago. I mean, it's real, you know, and this is just, that's kind of the basis at this point. So it's an
I was
go ahead.
go ahead. No,
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 no, Jim. But what were you going to say?
no,
I want
I don't even know. Go ahead. You talk.
I was listening to listening to this YouTube podcast where Chris Tucker was interviewing one of those guys talking about, because you know they're seeing UFOs now in California. They were seeing a lot of them in New York and
Yeah.
New Jersey, but they also see them in California. So Chris Tucker was talking to one of those guys, and Chris Tucker said that what he believes that they are is that they're spiritual beings from this planet, like angels or demons.
Yeah.
That's what he says that these are. That these UFOs, in his opinion, is like some angels or demons, biblical beings, is what he believes. I don't know.
But it's
I
not,
don't
it's
think.
not, it's probably not an either or thing though. You know, you're probably talking about all sorts of crap, you know? I mean, this is the way, I mean, I've always said this, you know, supposedly, okay. So supposedly, Paul Hellyer, the guy who just passed away a few years ago, he was the defense minister of Canada. And we get a lot of our UFO information from Canada because they know what's going on in the US, but they aren't bound by security oaths because they're not American, right? So he said that before he passed away, he said that the last he had heard, the US military had identified 60 different species of intelligent beings. 60. Now I've heard now it's 80, that they found 80. And you go back to like the 1960s, this guy named Robert Dean, I don't know if you ever heard of him, Robert O. Dean. He worked with NATO. In the 1962, they produced because he apparently was only like, there was only like 18 people that actually had access to this. They produced a report called The Assessment of the Situation. And there were only 14 copies of it, and they all ended up getting burned. But he read one of the copies of it because he said at that time there were UFOs that were coming from the Arctic and invading the space in both North America and Russia. And Russia thought it was us, and we thought it was Russia. And then we both kind of like figured out, no, it's neither one of us. And these things would fly down from the Arctic and then fly back and disappear. And apparently, finally, NATO figured out, no, they weren't disappearing. They were going up into space from the Arctic, straight up into space. So they developed this report, and they came to the conclusion they were from other planets. And supposedly, Dean said in that report, they identified 4 species of extraterrestrials. And that was in 1962, and now supposedly it's 80. But the fact is, they're probably all over the place, and who knows if some of them are going to be humanoid, and some of them aren't, and some of them are going to be, I don't know what do you want to call them, non-physical beings or whatever. I mean, you're really probably talking about just a whole mess of people, for lack of a better term, you know, and they're probably all coming here because why wouldn't they? It's nice.
Yeah. I need to find those video clips, man. YouTube and ever since COVID, well, before COVID or after COVID, they started censoring a whole bunch of videos on YouTube, and I can't find the secret NASA transmission clips anymore.
Oh,
So I told you about. I can't find them anymore.
Yeah.
They used to have them on YouTube all over the place, where you could see when NASA was filming their space expeditions out there, and you could see all kinds of flying objects and things like
Yeah.
that. Especially when they were testing that tether device
Uh-huh.
to gather power.
Yeah, I
You
saw
could see all
those.
kinds of things.
Right.
Oh, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're
then.
talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah. Uh-huh. And they aren't online anymore,
yeah,
huh?
that's right. I can't find them anymore. I tried my best to find them,
Oh,
and it's censored.
that doesn't surprise me.
It
The
might be.
people, I mean, you know, I'm pissed at YouTube. I think they're throttling us. We've done 220 shows. On the first 100 shows, I got flagged for misinformation 5 times. It's like, really. And I was just getting started. Hardly anybody was watching, but they noticed. I'm sure they got an AI algorithm that here's the speech or whatever. It's like, I don't know. It just pisses me off. And not only that, they're probably on the take from the government, and the government's probably getting the money, giving them the money to can that sort of stuff. I'm really cynical about this thing. I just think that, you can go back 50, 70 years. The government's been paying people to shut up. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I actually have some real concrete examples of that. So it wouldn't surprise me at all that they're taking this stuff offline. But I don't know if they can keep up. Go ahead.
Yeah, you know what? I just YouTubed it, and yes, there's a bunch of them. It's still on YouTube. It's the secret NASA transmissions. Some of them are oh my God, they actually put the original video. It's the whole 1.5 hour video of like it's a documentary made. They don't have the actual transmissions anymore, but they have documentaries that use clips of those transmissions.
Right.
So yeah, you could actually see them still. Oh, that's really good. I better download this before.
Because they probably can't, there's probably so much of it they can't get rid of it. Yeah, they got rid of the original clips, but they can't get rid of the reuse probably. And not to mention the fact that the EXIF information is probably stripped out, so they're probably looking for that, and they don't see it, so they don't notice. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. That's when I heard that they're finding like that. That's the beginning steps. It's the beginning steps, Jim. I think we're starting to enter like this age of what is truth. I think the truth is slowly starting to come out on almost everything.
Oh, think you're old enough. You're old enough to know this. It's the age of Aquarius.
Wait, are we in the age of Aquarius?
Actually, I think
just left Pisces.
No. I think we are technically in the age of Aquarius. I think it was like 2006 or something like that. Yeah, I think we are. But I was actually just making a joke too. It's like, flower power, hippie stuff, all that stuff. Those goddamn hippies.
Yeah. The reason why I said that was I saw something about the ages that we're living in, and I think the last age that we lived in was the age of Pisces, where everyone was believing in Jesus, and then there was the fish symbols everywhere. But I think they were talking about we're going to be entering the age of Aquarius. And I think we're in it now.
Yeah, I think we are. I don't know when we cross the line, but I think like I said, I think it happens somewhere around 2006. I'm not sure, but I can't. I pull a lot of stuff out of my butt to do this, and some of it's probably wrong. So. Oh, hey, before we go on to your little insane asylum trip, though, one other thing I want to talk about, this UFO thing. Now, this is kind of, I don't know what to make of this. They're now on YouTube. People are posting videos of UFOs that are so clear. I'm starting to wonder if it's AI. And the thing is, and at this point, I'm starting to think, if AI could do this so easily, all this now, unfortunately, this video evidence is bogus. Do you see this? Have you noticed this?
Yeah. I was watching an AI video side by side that they did of Will Smith eating some ramen noodles, and they were showing what it looked like. They were showing what it looked like in 2013, and then the other one was 2024. And the one in 2013, you could see Will Smith had like 4 arms, and he was feeding it to his eyeball and everything. It was just all over the place. But the one from 2024, it looked just like Will Smith.
Yeah,
it looked just like him.
Right.
And so it's like you said, it's almost unrecognizable, the fake and the real now.
Yeah,
it's very, very difficult.
It is. I know. I like to think I'm pretty savvy. I've been working with video for 50 years, but I've gotten to the point where I can tell, when people put, for lack of a better term, pictures of hot chicks online. I can tell when they're I can kind of tell when they're AI. But no, the video stuff, I gotta admit, I see there's videos of circular objects flying around, and I have no idea if those are real or not. I know, and if people post them and say this really happened to me, and maybe it did, maybe it didn't, and that's the problem. If it really did happen, who at this point, who's going to believe you? That's the real problem. It's really sad.
Have you seen that that clip of that fisherman over in California where I think he's fisherman, but he was definitely in a boat, and then an airplane comes out of the ocean?
No, I haven't seen
Have you
that.
seen that
No.
one?
Uh-uh.
I gotta find that and show that to you. I don't know if that's real or fake. If he staged it, I mean, it was definitely high quality, like Hollywood style graphic effects right there. It's the shaky cat. It looks like he recorded it off his phone, but it looks so realistic. It's like a Harriet jump jet
Uh-huh.
came out of the ocean and just flew off. It just came out the ocean and just flew off, and it looked so real. The shakiness and the way the guy that was filming it was doing. I gotta find it and show
Well,
it. I don't know if that was AI or real.
the big thing right now is this, and I haven't actually seen the video, but I guess there's video to go along with it about the fact this thing that happened once again off the coast of California. This is all by Guadalupe Island, which is I think just south of Catalina, if I'm right, where these more of these tic tac things, but one of them they actually supposedly have video. One of them coming right out of the ocean. It's just, and I don't think that's what you're talking about because this is not an airplane. This is one of these things that looks like a propane tank, you know. But the thing is that they came out of the ocean and then they flew away in formation. And apparently this is real. The Jeremy Corbell said he interviewed people on it's the USS Jackson, if I'm right, who saw this, actually saw it with their own eyes. This no FLIR or any of that sort of stuff. They actually saw it, and they had FLIR video, and they have radar, and they have the whole bit. It happened 2 years ago, but it's taken Corbell this long to actually get permission to actually show it. But I haven't seen it yet. But apparently, it's pretty startling.
Yeah. We're starting. California is starting to. I mean, a lot of stuff is starting to come out of California in terms of this UFO stuff. One last thing.
Yeah.
Have you heard about that in California? I think it was like last year or something. It might have been this year, but definitely last year, I think. The police had recorded an alien that was 10 feet tall in someone's backyard.
That was in Las Vegas, right?
Remember?
Was
it in Las Vegas?
Yeah.
It was in Las Vegas.
Yeah. So I've never actually seen the video. Have you seen the video?
No, I haven't seen the video, but that's what Chris Tucker was talking about with his guest.
Yeah.
And Chris Tucker and the other guest both agreed that the police department is never going to release that video. They will not.
Yeah.
If they really caught it, because all the police said that they saw it. They were on interviews saying, yeah, we saw this and that, and we got it.
Right.
But someone took their footage and won't show it.
And
someone took their footage.
And that's my point. Everyone's getting paid off. Now, you know, that whole story was so murky because at first there was talk that the people in the house saw it and the police didn't. And then the police didn't see it, but we have video. And then there was I read something about the fact that the police had a FLIR camera that caught like 1 second of these beings. You know, apparently they said, well, they're apparently camouflaging themselves, but the FLIR camera looked through it, and it was that's the thing. Who knows what the hell happened? You know, the police department. You know, somebody at the CIA says the police department, you know, here's $50,000 if you don't talk, and they take the money. I mean, I'm going to give you a story. This is apparently verified. You know the Travis Walton thing that happened in the 1970s. You know, Travis Walton got picked up, him and 7 guys in a truck. They're loggers, and they were coming home, and they stopped because this UFO, this circular object, landed in a field, and Walton got out of the truck to go up to see it. He walked out of there, and his friends are going nuts, you know, and he got hit by some sort of beam of light, and they thought he was dead, and they drove away. So anyway, they said, well, we got to go back and get him. They went back to get him. He was gone. And he was gone for 5 days, and people thought he was dead. As a matter of fact, the families were starting to think that the 6 guys killed him. That was actually the story. And then he showed up 5 days later. He said he was on the spacecraft. Okay. But the thing is, all 7 of those guys have been tested numerous times polygraph tests, they passed all of them. Well, one time, one guy came up inconclusive, but they've never failed any. But here's the point. So one of the guys' name is Steve Pierce, and this happened in, was it Oregon? No, Arizona. This happened in Arizona, and he lives kind of out in the middle of the nowhere, rural. And I don't know if you ever heard about this guy named Philip Klass. Philip Klass was during the 70s and 80s. He was like the premier UFO debunker in America. He didn't buy any of this stuff, and he always came up with some reason why it was happening. So one day, Pierce said, Philip Klass showed up at his house in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's like, it's like he drove there. It's like, and he said he offered Pierce $50,000 if he would change his story, which would be about, this is in like 1975, so it would be about $250,000 now, and so the question really though is, whose money is that? Because it was not Klass's money. He didn't need to do this, So it's obvious. I mean, it's like, you can't be a dummy about this stuff. Somebody gave the money to Klass to do this, and it was because it's not Klass. And so then the question was, well, who is that? Well, I don't know, but somebody's doing it. Somebody's offering people money to shut up. There you go. That's my story.
I actually know the story that you're talking about. They made a movie about that, right?
Yeah,
it's called Fire in the Sky.
Yes, I don't think this story about Klass showing up at his house was in the movie. I don't think that was, but yeah, that's the story. You're right. It's the movie Fire in the Sky, right? That's it, right? So anyway,
Yeah,
I look at that as proof of the fact somebody's paying people to shut up. That's the way I look at it. Okay, so tell us.
Definitely.
No, go ahead.
Okay. There's definitely a cover up. So,
tell us about your little trip. You took a little adventure.
Okay. So I went to I'm a field engineer. So I was told to go to this building. I didn't know what the building was, and I was supposed to fix their network.
So you did this on work. You were working, huh?
Yeah, I went to work, and my GPS took me to this area, and then it told me to turn left, and I was in like a state park. I thought I was in a state park. I know that I passed by a prison. It was a colonial building that had fences around it. But the odd thing about the prison was it was boarded up. Like, have you ever seen a drug house with the boards on it?
Oh yeah,
blocking off the window.
Right.
Yeah. So when I turned into the state park, it must have been over 20 different type of buildings and houses in there with those boarded up. It was all boarded up. I didn't know where the hell I was. And then eventually I called my project manager. He gave me the phone number of the place, and they're like, yeah, you're in the right place. You just got to keep going down. And so I went there, and then I talked to the point of contact there, and we went back and forth while I was done with my work. And they told me that this place was a national monument.
Yeah.
Almost, it was considered a national monument, and it was called the Willard Insane Asylum.
All right, I got to stop you.
The story of that place.
I looked this up this afternoon because when you said you were going to come on and talk to. I got a picture here. Look at it. Look how slick this is. That's the picture of the place, right? Yeah. Can you see the screen right now or not?
Yeah.
Is that where you were?
Yeah, I could see it. It looks like that's a very nice picture. It didn't look like that. Imagine that, but all busted down.
Okay, right. All right. Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. Yeah. But yeah, that's what I read too. That this is a national monument, right? Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Usually national monuments, you got to pay and then get tickets, and then there's special places to walk in. None of that is here. Yeah. It was basically like enter at your own risk type place here.
Well, I got to hold it. Yeah. I got to ask you a question. That was actually, that's what I was wondering too, because you said that the staff said the place was haunted, and I'm thinking, well, is there staff there? Because all the information I found is that this place is closed. And I thought, well, okay, if it's a national monument, they might have staff on hand there. But you're saying there's staff there, but it's not open to the public. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, all the buildings, like I said, there's over maybe, I want to say over 20 buildings. But there's one building there for drug rehab, and that's the building I was at. And that's the only one that's still open. It's for people that are trying to get that are there for rehab, drug rehabilitation.
Right.
It's just one building, but everything around there is closed down. And from what I know, it's been closed down since 1995. But there was a prison there afterwards. After they closed down the insane asylum, they had a prison there for a while. But eventually that closed down. And that story is even weirder than the insane asylum. So real quick about the insane asylum. It was opened in 1860 something, or 67 or something like that. And originally this was groundbreaking when they first opened this place. It was to deal with people with chronic insanity, chronic mental illness, something that was not understood at the time. So they opened a place just to study these people, to see if they can cure them. And from what the videos that I saw when I was driving home from that place, there were people that were cured. But eventually, so many people were put into this place that they started experimenting on these people. They started using people to experiment on. Just to let you know the numbers, it was 50,000 people were patients here, but half of that number died there. So out of the 50,000 people, 25,000 died at this place. And out of the 25,000 people that died, there's 5,000 that are buried undocumented. They're buried with just a number next to them. So this is patient number 417 or something like that. And there's 5,000 of these unmarked graves.
Unbelievable.
Over 5,000. I think. Yeah. So they were definitely experimenting on people.
Based on your numbers, this place was open for over a century, right?
Yeah, it's been there since, I want to say 1876 or 1867. But yeah, definitely it's been there a long time.
Holy
very,
shit.
very long time. So some of the treatments that they were using there was they would chain some of these people up just to see if chaining people up would save them. They were using hydrotherapy. I don't know what that is. I would think that it's just they were drowning people.
Yeah, water torture.
Electric. Yeah, water torture. Have you ever heard of this before, Jim? Back in the days when women were insane, they would use a vibrator and make these women orgasm.
Yeah, actually, I have heard of that. Yeah, I have heard of that. Right. It's called marriage. I'm sorry. I made a joke. I'm bad. I'm a bad man. Nobody should watch this. No, but actually, seriously,
one of the therapies.
I have heard of that. Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, supposedly that was one of the treatments that came out of this place. Also, eugenics came out of this place as well. The birth control, they found a way to do birth control out of this place. I think what is it? Euthanizing humans and I think I don't know if it's called euthanizing, but controlling reproductive organs and things like that came out of this place. So they definitely experimented, and lobotomies came out of this place. So they really, really experimented heavily on this place. Eventually the funding left, and so they shut it down. So anyway, back to some of the stories that I heard.
Well, first of all, hold on. How many people actually work there now?
At the place I was at,
yeah,
there must have been at least 10, I want to say 10 staffers, and there were actual drug patients there. It's just a small building. It's a very, very small building.
So it is not, it's not the building on the screen, right?
So that building could be it. I just haven't seen it because, like I said, it's like a little town there. So there's over 20 of these buildings, and maybe that building right there might still be around. You know, it might still be there. But I didn't get to. I wasn't going to travel around there, Jim. I'm sorry. I'm scared. I don't want to mess around with the spiritual world.
No.
You know, so I definitely was not driving around. And like I said, there's no fences. There's no like a secretary or receptionist says, "Hey, this is a map of the place. Walk." No, this is all enter at your own risk. So if that building so if that building right there is one of the buildings, then it's definitely inside is whatever.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. So what did
it might be.
what did some of the staff tell you?
So there was the point of contact that I saw was there when the place still had a prison.
Uh-huh.
And of course, the other staff that was there, every time they go to the other buildings, like there's a recycling center where they take their trash to and take it. They would tell me, of course, the typical, they hear noises, they hear someone will call their name and they'll turn around and nobody's there. They see footprints of weird things like human footprints there, and they don't know where this is. So once in a while, they go into a building, and I don't know why they do this, but there'll be dust on the building, and you'll see children's footprints, and that's what the maintenance guy told me. He said he was in one of the buildings and he saw children's footprints in the dust. Okay, real quick. So in 1995, when they shut down the insane asylum, a couple years later, a bunch of homeless people started moving into the buildings there and started living in there, right?
Uh-huh.
And the homeless people, once in a while, the police would come, and the homeless people would be scared to death. They would tell the police that when they sleep at this place, they would wake up to someone tapping them, like someone tapping on them to wake them up.
Yeah.
And almost all the homeless people said the same thing. They'll hear noises at night, and they'll have like people constantly touching on them. Now, when that place became a prison later, the point of contact that was there when it was a prison, she said that the police there or the deputies wouldn't sleep in the prison, that they would go out in their cars and sleep rather than sleep in the prison because of the same thing.
That's pretty bad.
Every time that they were, every time the police would close their eyes and fall or take a nap or something, there would be a tap on their shoulder or something, and it would shake and get them, and they'll wake up.
Huh.
And eventually it scared them so bad that, okay, I just have to tell you one last story. I can go on forever.
No, I actually want to hear this stuff. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, they were telling me stories. They loved talking about it. The people that work there, like I was there with the maintenance lady, the maintenance man, I guess the supervisor of the place, and one other person, and a patient that was there. And they loved telling these stories of the weird events that they encountered. But this is one story I have to tell you. So when it was a prison, there was a deputy, and he was doing his rounds one day in the prison, where making sure that everything's fine. And as he's walking down the hall, he sees down the hall, he sees a man wearing a suit and holding a cane. And as soon as he saw that man, because remember, this is a prison.
Yeah.
It's like an outsider within the prison. So he called downstairs, he saw the man. He said, "Hey, freeze. Well, what are you doing here?" And so he ran down to try to catch the man. The man made a turn on the corner. And when the deputy got up to the corner, the man disappeared. So what the deputy did was he called downstairs into the operations or whatever, and they had to shut down the whole building because they saw an outsider inside the prison.
Right.
So they shut down the whole building, and they had state troopers or something, and they searched the whole place. It took like a couple of days or something to try to find this person, and they never found that person. Right? They actually shut down the prison. And so a couple years later, when they were cleaning out the prison, they found this picture of a man in a suit holding a cane. And they asked the deputy, "Is this the person?" This is a couple of years later.
Yeah.
And the deputy is like, "That's the guy I saw that day, and we had to shut down the prison. That's the guy." And then they told him he was one of the doctors there way back in the 1900s.
Oh my
that was
God.
doing some of the experimentations.
Jesus.
And it's incredible. Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Jim. No, you go ahead.
So in 1995, when they shut down this whole insane asylum place, they found a whole bunch of suitcases from the people that were put into the asylum and died there,
Yeah.
and they left their suitcase. Just to let you know, the majority of the people that went into this place didn't leave.
Right.
The majority of them that went in, they died in here. And
Yeah.
there's stories of like people that were basically just a little bit obnoxious that were just put in there. Like a man didn't like his wife or something like
Yeah.
that, and he would say, "Hey, my wife is crazy," and he'll drop her off there. There was a train that would take patients and drop them off at this place, and then the train would drive off. And that's what people were doing. They would put their loved ones or people that they I don't know how to call these people they didn't like or whatever, and drop them off there. And the insane asylum wouldn't let them leave,
Yeah.
even if they were healthy or not. They were basically utilizing these people to do experiments on them.
Yeah.
This is a very creepy place.
Oh,
in
yeah.
terms of that story alone.
Well, I got to tell you, I got this picture off of there's an entry for the Willard Insane Asylum on Wikipedia, and this picture's from there. But in that, there was nothing in the story about any sort of hauntings. And I don't know if you read a lot of Wikipedia stuff. I do. Sometimes for older buildings, they mention stuff like that. But they did mention the fact that they found hundreds of these suitcases. They did mention that. That was the only thing that unusual in the whole description of the whole place. So that's kind of weird. It said in the Wikipedia they found them in an attic of the building.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Yeah, go ahead. You go ahead.
Go ahead, Jim.
No.
They had some. I forgot the name of. They had someone from like a paranormal investigation place come there multiple times from different investigation places, and I think they said they never found anything. Like one of them didn't. That it was odd because they were there. They did some experiments, and then the window was open one day out of nowhere, and then a whole bunch of pigeons went in there and started pooping on all their equipment, and that was the most oddest one. But they didn't find anything, but the stories still stay there. I mean, there's still a bunch of stories of weird events like what I said. And that picture that you're showing is just one building. If you get an aerial view, it's like I said, it's a huge town.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find a different building and send it to you.
That's the only picture of the place I could find online. That's it.
Really? That's the only picture?
Yeah. Well,
I'm Googling it.
I didn't search that hard, but
yeah, there's a lot of them. That is one creepy place. I didn't know that New York had things like that, to tell you the truth. I've had stories like that.
About your story about the doctor in the photo,
Yep.
I'm going to tell you a story that my wife has told me, and this happened to her way before I even met her. I mean, years before. So there's my wife is a native of Minneapolis, and they went up. There's a resort, what we call up north, which is, in kind of northern Minnesota, called Breezy Point. It's very famous. It's very large. It's probably the premier resort in northern Minnesota. And she went up there for a weekend with, I think, 3 or 4 girlfriends. And so they were going to rent a cabin at Breezy Point. And they went there, and it turned out for whatever reason, there was some mix-up, and the cabin they rented was given to somebody else. And they said, well, look, if you want, you can stay in the original building. There was the oldest building on the whole campus, and it was kind of sort of a little hotel. That's how the place started. And normally now they didn't rent rooms in there, but they said, if you still want to stay here, you can rent a room in there. And so, okay, that's fine. And they did. And they went into the building, and they're walking around, and they said they ran into this weird little creepy little man who was bouncing a ping pong on a ping pong paddle, And he said, would any of you ladies like to play ping pong? And they said, no, thanks. He said, okay, fine. He left, and they saw him a couple more times. And then the last time they saw him, he said the same thing. Would you ladies like to play ping pong? And they declined, and he opened a door to leave, and they followed him, and the door he opened was to a broom closet. There was nothing in there. This guy went into a broom closet and disappeared. And they just completely freaked out, and they went to the front desk and said, "What's going on?" And they said, "Oh yeah, that's the reason we don't rent that building out. It's haunted." So, it reminds me of the same thing. But my wife said this guy looked completely real. I mean, it's like until they followed him into the broom closet, other than the fact he was a little weird, they didn't think anything of it, except that he walked into a closet and disappeared. That's the only thing. And yeah, then the people running the place, they confirmed the fact that the place is haunted. So it reminds me of the same story, same type of deal. Who can explain why that stuff happens? I mean, we don't have you're talking, this talking about going full circle here, and we're almost done here. Our 2 hours is almost done, so it's probably good. You're getting back to the thing, your physics. We don't know shit. We don't know how any of this stuff happens.
That's right. That's right. It's too complex for us to understand. Like I said, theory of forms. We make math to try to understand math, but we're bound by the mathematical principles of like 2 + 2 has to equals 4.
Yeah.
But then you have things like paranormal activities and that don't have a mathematical formula to them. How are you going to understand this? So what most people say is ghosts are not real because they don't fit in the mathematical formula.
Right.
There's no math for them.
Yeah.
But basically, we just don't understand enough yet.
Yeah.
Why this is.
And so people keep saying this stuff isn't real. And then there's like my wife and like your friends, the people you met today, people say they see this stuff. I mean, so I have a hard time discounting that anecdotal evidence. I just do, I believe my wife, I'm sure. And not to mention the fact she had friends with her. They all saw it, So, I mean, you can't, I don't know. It's hard to say that, well, it's not real when people are actually seeing it. People see it. I don't know what to make of it. I just don't. And then the question.
I got it.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead, please.
Okay. I got to tell you, Jim, I've never been to, I've been doing what I've been doing over 10 years now, over 15 years probably now. And I have never been to a site where they told me it's haunted. I've never, ever went to any, I worked in the hospitals down in the basement. I saw some creepy things, but no one has ever told me, hey, you shouldn't be alone. This place is haunted. And that's what they told me at this location. When they put me down in the basement, they wouldn't leave me alone. They wouldn't leave me alone. They stayed there with me. And I don't know if you know anything about supervisors of buildings. They're busy. They don't have time to just hang out with you.
Right.
But the supervisor wouldn't let me alone. She's like, I'm going to stay with you until the maintenance guy is free. And because there was some problems where I had to leave and come back into the building to repair. And so she let me downstairs, and then she called the maintenance guy to come to take over, but she wouldn't leave. She was a busy person, but she wouldn't leave me. She stayed with me the whole time. In the basement.
That's really serious. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never been at a business, any place in the over the 15 years I've been doing this. I've never been at any place where they told me it's haunted. You shouldn't be alone here. And that's what creeped me out the most right there.
I believe it.
It's the weirdest thing. I've never, yeah.
But then again, I have to ask you, you've probably never been to a place that has that much freaking weird history either, have you? I mean,
I didn't know that places like this existed, where it, like I said, imagine a huge state park. You're only showing one building there.
Yeah.
Imagine a huge state park with a bunch of buildings like that picture that you're showing, but boarded up. There's a bunch of them that are burned down. They're burned down and breaking apart all over the place. It's a huge state park with over 20 of these buildings.
Yeah.
That the picture I've never ever been like this. And like I said, there's no receptionist. There's nobody. It's enter at your own will.
Right.
It's like an abandoned town.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest thing.
I just find it amazing
And
there are people that actually work there, but that's, whatever.
yeah, there's one building there, and yeah, that is pretty crazy
But
that there is one building.
I got to go in 6 minutes. But the thing is, I
Okay.
mean, but just to wrap this up though, it seems like it's places like this that are always really haunted. Places where like a lot of people have died or a lot of people have experienced trauma. I mean, look, like, I've never been to Gettysburg, but people say they constantly see ghosts there, even during the day. It's like, I mean, you're talking about a battlefield where people just, and death was worse years ago because it was more barbaric. So I don't know. I mean, the general theory is that it's the emotional trauma these people are experiencing that kind of it somehow impresses themselves on the physical location, but nobody really knows. No, they don't.
Yeah, and if any place is haunted, I would say this would be one of the top places because of the way they were treating
Right.
the patients here.
Exactly. Right. You
Yeah,
think that?
it's not humane. That's definitely, this was not a humane
Yeah.
place.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey,
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, always a pleasure. Really. Thank you. That was just a fantastic story. I love talking to you. I appreciate it a lot. So we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Yep.
You take care. Bye-bye. That's Think. I got too much stuff going on. There we go. And yeah, we got to go. We have a 2-hour limit on our show for all sorts of various reasons, and we're pushing up to it in just a couple of minutes. So just let me wrap this up again. I want to thank Think for calling in. That was terrific. I mean, it's creepy. How do you explain stuff like that? Want to thank Jonathan Lockwood for his knowledge on military and space history. That was fantastic too. So we're we don't do Fridays here normally. Normally, because a couple weeks ago we did a 5-week show. A 5-show week. We actually did Monday through Friday because if guests can only come on Friday, we'll do a Friday show, but that doesn't happen very often. So we don't do Fridays. We're taking Monday off. We'll be back on Tuesday. Don't know what's going on next week. We'll do shows Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. On Wednesday, Larry Newman, our friend, our Bigfoot investigator and bail bondsman friend, he's coming back on. Matter of fact, there's been a lot of Bigfoot sightings lately, a lot. And so we got a lot to talk about with him. And the really weird thing is I've been reading now that there's both on the West Coast and in Pennsylvania and stuff, there's housing developments where people say the residents say they see Bigfoot so often they don't even bother to report it anymore. They just don't. It's like, there's Bigfoot in the backyard. Literally, that's supposedly the way it works. So yeah, we'll talk to him about that too. I want to thank you folks for watching. I love doing this and I'm glad you enjoy it. I hope you do anyway. So yeah, we'll see you on Monday. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie. And good night to you wherever you are. We'll see you on Monday. You guys have a nice weekend. Take care.